Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Kara, and I'm with the LTAP Center here at ODOT, and I'll be your host for this webinar. Today's webinar is State Fiscal Year 2025 5310 Program Orientation, and we're thrilled to have Kira Branch and Tim as our presenters today. Before we begin, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping items to ensure a smooth webinar experience for everyone. If you have any questions during the presentation, please use the questions panel on your screen. You can type the questions there and we'll address them during the Q&A session at the end. If you're experiencing any technical difficulties or have any other issues, feel free to use the chat panel to communicate them with our team, and we'll do our best to assist you. A PDF copy of the presentation is available for your reference in the handout section. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and the recording will be made available to all registered attendees after the session. All right, with that out of the way, let's get started. It's my pleasure to hand it over to Kira. Kira, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the 5310 program orientation. My name is Kira Branch. I'm the 5310 program coordinator. And today's orientation is really going to discuss several of the projects that were awarded for state fiscal year 2025, where we will discuss next steps for those particular projects. So on today's orientation agenda, we're going to talk about the overview of several projects. I'm going to walk through a couple of forms with you. Some of the reporting requirements that we have. Tim Maseko is going to discuss a few things as it relates to procurement. We're going to discuss contracts, have options for Q&A, and then also the program purpose as well. What I did notice from our previous survey questions, or whenever we do give the 5310 program orientation, there are several different questions that we get back. Most of those questions are the same. And so I did take a lot of that information to really build out this presentation to be able to address a lot of those questions. Some of the common topics that I've received were clear instructions on reporting. So how do we report, some of our ridership information? How do we report on certain projects? We also got questions about allowable and unallowable project costs. So I will talk about that throughout the presentation. Also some project specifics, especially as it relates to vehicles and what that vehicle timeline looks like, and then what goes into an operating and capitalized maintenance budget invoice. And so those are several different things that you will hear throughout the presentation. If you are a returning subrecipient, a lot of this information, I will say, you have heard before, but there are some new topics that we will discuss. If you are new, I definitely encourage you to take a lot of notes because there will be a lot of information provided. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and get started on the purpose of the grant. I will not read this entire slide. I'll stop here, allow you all to kind of, take a look at some of this information, but I do want to sum up the purpose of the 5310 program, more specifically for those agencies that have been longstanding in the program, and then also for some of our new 5310 subrecipients. So when you think about the 5310 program, specialized transportation, the agency is really filling in the gaps of those unmet transportation needs for seniors and persons with disabilities. So every project you receive, whether it be vehicles, operating, contracted services, preventative maintenance, those specific projects and that grant funding should be utilized to remove those barriers of transportation. We understand that there might be times where you have to provide transportation to the general public, and there are options for that, but definitely communicate that to ODOT, as these specific projects and this funding is geared towards meeting the transportation needs of seniors and persons with disabilities. In this particular slide as well, you'll see definitions for seniors and then terms for disabilities as well. But if for any reason your agency seeks to utilize those vehicles for providing transportation to the general public, please feel free to reach out to me, reach out to ODOT staff, and we can best direct you on how that transportation can be conducted. Alrighty, so for state fiscal year 2025, there were quite a few projects that we awarded this year. We awarded computer hardware and software projects. We also awarded a few preventative maintenance projects for active 5310 funded vehicles, operating assistance funding, contracted transportation services, and then also vehicles as well. One thing you'll notice during this presentation is that there is a section that is dedicated to each of these projects. And so as we're going through each of these projects, feel free to kind of keep those questions in mind that you have. Alrighty, so we'll get started with vehicles. So vehicles are to be used for the program-related purposes for which the 5310 grant is made. As you remember, I talked about the 5310 program, the purpose of that program really geared towards meeting the transportation needs of seniors and persons with disabilities. And so as you're getting those vehicles, just keep that in mind. You should be using those vehicles to remove those barriers of transportation. Something new this year, and you'll see it in red as well, is that those vehicles must be in service within 45 days of the delivery date. And we'll kind of talk a little bit throughout this presentation or this section about vehicles, when they'll come, and that process for getting vehicles. But when you do receive your vehicle from the vendor and you go through that process, those vehicles must be in service within 45 days of delivery date. If the vehicle is not in service after that 45 days, and there are any issues that you have, the subrecipient should be submitting written correspondence to ODOT, and this can be via email with the reason for the delay in vehicle start. There might be issues with that vehicle, which, hopefully not, because those vehicles are new, but you might have an issue with the memorandum of title, just different things. So definitely make sure that you are communicating that to ODOT, because we will assume that when it does come time for vehicle reporting, that vehicle was in service 45 days after you have received it. It is crucial that subrecipients comply with all of the contractual rights of the vehicle, and then also to making sure that if that vehicle is not eligible for disposition, you are still utilizing that vehicle. So again, if you have any issues with that vehicle whatsoever, please just make sure you are communicating that with ODOT. And if for any reason that vehicle is no longer needed for the original project purpose, then please contact ODOT immediately. Please reach out to me, and we can definitely discuss, next options for that particular vehicle. We also have on our website a new 2023 to 2026 vehicle catalog. And that vehicle catalog will really go into detail about the vehicle options that you have, giving a vehicle summary, a standard equipment, optional equipment, some pictures also too for those particular vehicles, and then a floor plan as well. So as you're completing your vehicle cost worksheet or having conversations with your agency and your board about the particular vehicle types that the agency needs, you do have a resource, which is the vehicle catalog, that will go into more detail with you. So the vehicle ordering process. For some of our new subrecipients, I want to really take some time to talk about that vehicle ordering process and what to expect next. So whenever an agency is awarded a vehicle, the document that you will receive is called a vehicle cost worksheet. So each subrecipient will receive a vehicle cost worksheet, and that worksheet determines the vehicle type that you're going to get and how you can begin the process of ordering that vehicle. With that vehicle cost worksheet, and I'll do a walkthrough with you, each agency should be completing a vehicle cost worksheet for each vehicle. So if you received more than one vehicle, then you will complete a separate cost worksheet for each of those vehicles. If you only received one, then you only need to do one vehicle cost worksheet. Each form will need to be signed by both the agency and the vendor and then returned to ODOT. Once I pull up that vehicle cost worksheet, you'll kind of understand what I'm talking about here. And then once the subrecipient has returned that vehicle cost worksheet with not only the agency signature, but also the vendor signature, then an ODOT staff member will prepare what's called a local share invoice, and we will invoice you for the local share on that particular vehicle. And then here, I will go ahead and pull up the vehicle cost worksheet so that we can do a quick high-level overview of some things that you'll see and you'll definitely want to pay attention to as it relates to that vehicle cost worksheet. Then I want to make sure my screen is sharing. Okay, I got a thumbs up that my screen is sharing. Okay, so this is the vehicle cost worksheet. One thing you'll see is that it'll be a master sheet this year. And so you'll have different tabs, which definitely you want to make sure that you're paying attention to. The first tab will be an instructions tab, which just gives you an overview of this vehicle cost worksheet, some things to keep in mind. But also too, what you'll see, as soon as you open up the master sheet, you'll want to pay attention to the several different tabs at the bottom. So you'll want to make sure that you're clicking through each of these tabs to understand all of the vendors and then the vehicle options that you have available. So please keep that in mind, that there will be multiple different vendors and multiple different vehicle cost tabs on the forms. I am going to, since this is the first tab here, the MMV with Braun, I'm just going to do a high-level overview of this vehicle cost worksheet. When you receive a vehicle cost worksheet for your specific vehicle, some things that you'll note is that your ODOT project number will be in there as well as the PID number, and this is the number for which your project is on. You'll also notice too in this particular form that there will be some cells that are locked, and that's because that information will be filled out from ODOT. So don't be alarmed if you can't type in some of these cells, and that's just because we don't want certain forms or certain columns to be altered. Also, what to keep in mind is your agency name. A lot of this information is straightforward. You'll put in your agency name. I will highlight this here. This is something that's very, very important. If for any reason the name on the title should be different than the agency name, you will want to list that here. We have had issues in the past where the agency name was listed, but then there should be a different name on the title, but that information was not listed here. So just make sure if for any reason there is a name that is different or should be on the title, that is listed. In the 5310 program, the years that I've been here, we haven't run into that issue, but I do know in other programs that has been the case. So just wanted to throw that out here. You also want to put in your address, contact information, phone. Again, all of this is pretty straightforward. Please make sure you are putting in the county as well. That is really helpful when we are when the vendor is titling that vehicle. And then something you will also note is the vendor information. I do like to point this out because if you have any questions about this particular vehicle order or some of the options that are available here, you will want to reach out to the vendor if there are specific questions that you have. Maybe there are options that you want to change, or just different questions about this vehicle. So make sure you are reaching out to the vendor. You'll see as I go through each of the tabs, the same thing. Vendor information is here. It's readily available. Most of the vendors, well, really all of the vendors are, they respond in a timely fashion, and they're more than happy to help you with some of the questions that you have. So just keep that in mind. What you'll also see is the items listed as well, the items for this particular vehicle, and then the quantity column as well. When you're filling out this column, you'll want to make sure that you're putting in the quantity. Once you do that, you'll notice that everything will total for you. So there isn't anything that you need to do where you're putting in those amounts. This information will total for you. One thing that you don't see here, but will be on your vehicle cost worksheet, is a line that says maximum federal award. This maximum federal award is the amount that will be in your contract and also to what you were awarded. So this will have a formula that will drag over here to then give you what your local share amount is. And so this is an overview of the vehicle cost worksheet. Again, it's very straightforward, but this is the form that you will use to get started with ordering your vehicle. So the agency doesn't, for our new subrecipients, the agency doesn't go out and look for different vehicles. We do all of that in-house. And then I will get back to the presentation slide. Okay. Alrighty, so once your vehicle is your vehicle cost worksheet, once that is complete, you've signed that, you've sent it back to ODOT with the vendor signature and the agency signature, you will receive what's called a local share invoice. And this is your local share payment that is due to ODOT for that vehicle. As you know, FTA provides 80% funding for capital projects, and then the local share invoice will include the 20% amount of that vehicle. Now, while that is true, I do want to mention that there is a thing such as a federal maximum award. So what you'll see and what you've seen in the past is sometimes the percentage does change, and that depends on the grant amount. So in most cases, while you may, within the application, you might apply for a vehicle, let's say that vehicle is 100,000, and then the 80% of that vehicle is 80,000, and then the 20% of course is 20,000. Depending on the grant funding for 5310, it might be where that amount is slightly altered, meaning that although the vehicle total project cost is 100,000, you might only receive 75. So that will then, of course, alter your local share. So just keep that in mind, that it won't always be that 80%, 20%, just based on the grant funds that are available at that time. Sometimes it might be that your federal share is more, which will then decrease your local share amount, or in some cases, it might be that your federal is less, which will increase your local share. So just keep that in mind. Even with that being said, you do have the option to change your vehicle type to, of course, fit those numbers that are comfortable for the agency within those different vehicle cost worksheets. The subrecipient does have 30 days to submit that local share payment, and that payment must be received by the due date. You will notice on that local share invoice, we will have the due date, which is usually 30 days. And so ODOT does expect for those funds to be returned within that time, because that continues to keep the ball rolling on your vehicle order. Any delay in your local share will only continue to delay that vehicle order for you. Once the local share has been received, ODOT staff will deposit that local share check and then start the process for generating what's called a purchase order. And then that purchase order is the document that ODOT sends to the vendor to order and build your vehicle. So when ODOT sends that purchase order, when we generate it, you will receive a copy of it as well as the vendor, and that purchase order will have your vehicle information on it, such as the project number for that vehicle, the amount, and then also attach the vehicle cost worksheet, which has your vehicle specifications. So that information you will receive. And then I wanted to also do a quick vehicle ordering overview. I know that was a lot of information that I covered within the first couple of slides, so just wanted to give an overview of how everything will work. The agency will receive a contract, you will execute that contract. The vehicle cost worksheets will be sent, completed, and returned to ODOT. ODOT will issue a local share invoice. Once we receive that local share payment, we will then deposit that, and then we will request from our finance team a purchase order. And then that purchase order will be sent to the vendor along with that vehicle cost worksheet to begin the process of building and delivering that vehicle. So let's talk really quickly about vehicle delivery. For some of our returning subrecipients, you are kind of very much aware of some of those vehicle ordering timelines. I will say at the 5310 conference, this was something that we did discuss with our vendors during the vendor panel, and it does seem as though we are a little bit farther away from that 1 year wait time. Vendors seem to be pushing out those vehicles a little bit early. That was something that I do remember them mentioning, so that is good news. As we know, pre-pandemic, it used to be 6 to 8 month delivery time frame. And then, of course, during the pandemic, agencies were waiting a lot longer than that. So just keep that in mind, just in case your vehicle may be out of that 6 to 8 month window. But we are seeing a little bit less wait times this year. For some of our returning subrecipients that are aware of the potential price increases for vehicles, some vehicles may have already had that have been ordered may have already had a price increase for the 5310 program. If you have had a price increase, I have reached out to you about those particular price increases and what changes need to be made. If this occurs, again, we will send out all of the information. And then potential vehicle order cancellations. I will say that we haven't seen any vehicle order cancellations, I will say, at least through this year. But just keep that in mind. If that vehicle is ordered, for some reason the vendor can't provide that particular vehicle for any reason, we will let you know. And then vehicle reporting. So as a 5310 subrecipient that receives vehicles, you are required to report on those vehicles semi-annually. So you are required to report once in January and then once in July as well. I will send out reminders to subrecipients about the reporting requirements each time that we have those reporting requirements, but I do encourage you to mark your calendars. If there is any reason that you have not reported or you've missed a reporting period, please keep in mind that this will impact your future 5310 funding opportunities. So if you're having any issues reporting, please definitely make sure you are communicating that with me so that I can note that, and then we can make sure that we assist you with getting those reports in. I do have the link here for that vehicle monitoring report. That is a form that is pretty straightforward that you will click on, and then subrecipients are required to report on their vehicle until it has met disposition. Here are just a few updates to that semi-annual reporting form once you pull that up. It used to be where the agency would go in and type in their agency name. This is no longer required this year. The way that we built the form is that you will have a drop down for your particular agency. You will select your agency name, and then it will populate all of your VINs that we have in our system. And that way you will report on each of those VIN numbers. We do also have questions about the days of operation, just wanting to understand how often the agency is providing that transportation. Is it Monday through Friday? Is it only 2 or 3 days a week? And then also too, what are your hours of operation? So make sure that information is put into the system. And then vehicle dispositions. If you are a new subrecipient, you're getting a new vehicle this year, or this is your first vehicle, this will apply to you, but it won't apply for, of course, several years. Once a 5310 vehicle has met its useful life, the subrecipient will need to fill out what's called a disposition request form. And this allows the ODOT to remove the lien off of that vehicle and then remove the agency from the requirements of reporting on that form or reporting on that vehicle. If that vehicle has met disposition, we will release that lien. You can still keep that vehicle within your fleet. However, you no longer have to report on that particular vehicle. I want to make that clear because I know sometimes agencies are hesitant to disposition the vehicles or submit requests for disposition just because they don't want to salvage that vehicle. If that vehicle is in working condition, ODOT definitely encourages you to keep that in your fleet, continue to use it for transportation, but we just want to remove the requirement of reporting on that particular vehicle. So just something to keep in mind. I do have the disposition request form here, the link here. If you have a vehicle that is eligible for disposition, you can click on the link after this presentation and submit that information. We do have updated disposition requirements, something that we've been talking about throughout the year for our modified minivans, AVs, and LTVs. We have, increased those guidelines for those vehicles. For example, for an MMV, it used to be 5 years and 120,000 miles, and so we did increase the mileage on that. And a lot of that really had to do with what we were experiencing in 2022 and 2021 during the pandemic, where agencies were dispositioning those vehicles pretty quickly, but we weren't getting vehicles in as quick. So just something to keep in mind, and the reason as to why the disposition guidelines were updated. And then vehicle transfer. If that vehicle hasn't met disposition, and that happens where an agency realizes either they shut down or they're not having a lot of transportation options or transportation services, and you can't utilize that 5310 vehicle, we do have the option to transfer the vehicle to another agency that has gone through the 5310 program, has gone through the 5310 process, understands the requirements of the 5310 vehicle. We can transfer that vehicle over. So please reach out to ODOT staff, reach out to me regarding any vehicle that may need to be transferred if it hasn't met disposition. If the vehicle qualifies for disposition, you don't want to just remove it out of your fleet. You do still want to submit that request. But if it hasn't met disposition, the first thing we will do is work to get that vehicle transferred over. Alrighty, so that is an overview of the vehicle section of vehicle projects, and then I want to stop here to see if there are any questions that any agency has as it relates to vehicles before we move on.
Okay, Kira, we have a question. Someone would like to know, is the vehicle cost worksheet different than the one submitted with the grant?
Yes, so that is a really great question, and I'm glad you brought that up. Whenever we submit a vehicle cost worksheets or we upload those within, and I believe when you say grant, you might be referring to the application. So just keep in mind that the vehicle cost worksheets that you receive during the application time, when you're completing that application, there will be a change. There might be a change in pricing, there might be a change in options. So when you actually receive the vehicle cost worksheets, once you've received your contract, those are the vehicle cost worksheets that are in good order that you can actually use. So that is why during the application cycle, we do ask agencies that, when you're using that tentative vehicle cost worksheet that we have uploaded with the application, that you do not get that signed, because that's not an order. The order and the vehicle cost worksheet is only set in stone once we send it out after you've been awarded and you have that contract.
Wonderful, thank you, Kira. Okay, our next question, will you send out reporting templates or where do they get them?
So I'm assuming you're referring to the reporting templates or the reporting for vehicles. There are reporting templates for operating and capitalized maintenance, but those will be discussed in the other section. So I'm going to assume that question is as it relates to vehicles. The reporting form for vehicles is actually in the presentation, which I'm just going to slide back here really quickly. So if you'll notice on this slide, the vehicle reporting slide, there is a link that I have listed here. But if any agency receives 5310 vehicles, I actually send out a mass email that will also include the link as well, so that you'll have that information. But there aren't any reporting templates in terms of that particular vehicle. There's just a reporting form that you go into the form stack link, and then you will fill out all of the information that we ask. So hopefully that answered that individual's question.
Thank you, Kara. Yep, it answered their question. Thank you so much. Another question, is there an overall checkoff list of items that are needed to be completed when awarded a vehicle?
So there isn't an overall checkoff list. That might be something that I definitely can create if that would be helpful to for our 5310 subrecipients. So if you feel like that would be helpful for you, definitely put that in the chat. I think that's something pretty easy I can put together if it might be helpful for new subrecipients. But we don't have a checkoff list. We just kind of go over how the vehicle is ordered. Again, we start with that vehicle cost worksheet, that contract, that local share invoice. For our returning subrecipients, I think if they've ever had conversations with some of our new subrecipients, they would also, attest to that as well, that once you kind of get through the process the first time, it's pretty easy to go through it again.
Fantastic. And we have one last question for now. Oh, nope, we just got another one. Two more. When you say disability, does that include transportation for individuals with a substance use disorder?
Yes, so that is a really, really good question. And this is something that has come up a lot. So yes, that does include an individual that has a mental impairment, such as a mental impairment, which would fall into a substance abuse disorder as well.
Wonderful, thank you. And what I think is going to be our last one for now, has there been an update on how we're supposed to report maintenance on the 5310 vehicles that are not part of the maintenance program?
That question might get a little bit more into TAR compliance. And so, Tim, I don't know if you're on the call, if you can jump into that. I might need a little bit more clarification from the subrecipient that asked the question. I know we do require maintenance, but Tim, I don't know if you can jump in and answer that question as it relates to the preventative maintenance policy. Tim says he's muted. So, Kara, I'm not sure if you can unmute Tim.
Oh, yep. So I just got unmuted. So
okay.
could you repeat the question again, make sure I understand what was being asked? Can you repeat the question?
So, can you hear me?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Okay, good. They're wanting to know has there been an update on how they're supposed to report maintenance on the 5310 vehicles that are not part of the maintenance program?
Okay, so for the vehicle maintenance program you're talking about would probably be your vehicle maintenance policy or plan. And so anything that's within our purview, you do have to maintain those accordingly. For vehicles that are not under the ODOT control, we only consider looking at the wheelchair and accessible equipment, I should say. So your wheelchair lifts, your ramps, things like that. Anything that would possibly break down and cause a problem for the ADA regulations from the federal government. So we're going to look at your FTA funded assets, and then also any vehicles you have in your fleet that have accessible equipment. We're also supposed to check those just to ensure they're in working order to meet the ADA requirements.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you, Tim. Okay, we have a couple more questions. Let's see here. Is there specific information to provide for local match?
So as it relates to local match, we will submit or send over to the agency the local share invoice, which will have information regarding what local share is actually due, what that payment is. There isn't any additional information that we require that would have been collected in the application, where we ask about the verification and then, of course, your sources of local match. But now that you've been awarded that vehicle, that local match information will be shown on the vehicle cost worksheet, and it'll also be shown on the local share invoice as well. So there won't be any additional information we'll collect.
Okay, thank you. Let's see here. Oh, someone is hoping that you can repeat the substance abuse. They want you to repeat that the substance abuse recovery can qualify as a disability, or what you said that it was that would qualify.
Yeah, so I think the what I was mentioning, or the question that was asked, was about mental impairment, and that does and substance abuse does fall under that. And so if you're transporting individuals that you're transporting individuals that you notice have a mental impairment or qualified as a mental impairment, such as substance abuse, would qualify under disability. I think that was the question that someone asked that I was answering.
Yes, I think that was kind of what they were asking too, was,
Okay. Okay.
if it falls under that. Yes. Last question, and then we'll move on. Will there be another opportunity to apply for preventative maintenance funding for the 5310 contracts?
Yes, absolutely. Preventative maintenance funding is for 5310 vehicles. Our application cycle will begin, and Jesse, you're on the line, so I'm going to spill the beans here a little bit, but our application cycle will begin in September. It's possibly September 1st, and so agencies will have the opportunity to apply for projects that they didn't apply for in state fiscal year 2025 to apply for state fiscal year 2026.
Okay, Kiera, thank you so much. We do not have any more questions, so if you're ready to move on, I think your participants are as well.
Okay, awesome. So we will go ahead and move on to the next section, which, speaking of preventative maintenance, capitalized maintenance, that is our next section. So what is preventative maintenance? And we use these terms interchangeably, as you'll probably know. Preventative maintenance, capitalized maintenance pretty much mean the same thing. This is all maintenance costs related to your active 5310 funded vehicles that are eligible. So those 5310 funded vehicles in your fleet. Capitalized maintenance is defined as all activities, material, supplies, labor, costs that are required to extend the functionality of those vehicles, continue the serviceability of those vehicles as well. As I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, I believe it was slide 2, I know there were a lot of questions about, hey, we have a preventative maintenance grant, but what is all eligible? We have this really big USOA, Uniform System of Accounts document with a lot of information, but can you just give us some bullet points? Just something that we can think about and put on our radar for what is eligible. So I definitely tried to do that in this section. So some examples of eligible cost. One is an in-house mechanic salary and fringe benefits. Now, with this being said, the mechanic must work on those 5310 funded vehicles. Now, if you do have a mechanic in-house, I will say most of the 5310, since I've been in the program several years, have not had in-house mechanics. But that is something that is new. I am starting to see some 5310s do that. Either they're hiring someone to just manage those particular vehicles. If they are working on your vehicles that are 5310 and then also working on other vehicles in your fleet that are not 5310, that will need to be approved through what's called the 2 CFR 200 documentation. And that information will be sent out to subrecipients. 2 CFR 200 is something that we will get into, or I will get into with the subrecipients aside from the program orientation. But that will need to be approved through that documentation with external audits. Another bullet point is any major repairs completed at a repair shop. So if you're getting a lift done, if you're getting a windshield replaced, some of those different things, if there's some small damage to the vehicle that you're getting repaired at a repair shop, those things are eligible to be claimed on the invoice. Oil changes, replacing brake pads, and then fixing issues present on the vehicle. So just keep that in mind if you have a preventative maintenance grant, that it really is the maintenance on that particular vehicle. And then I do have the USOA, which is the Uniform System of Accounts. And this is a FTA, a federal document that goes over, you know, a little bit more in detail about the eligible activities under capitalized maintenance. Then I also have a note to refer to section 3. I know that when I pull up documents, I rather just, you know, go to the specific section instead of going through, you know, a 112-page document. And so section 3 has a lot to do with capital expenses for further information. But just an overview, as you are submitting those capitalized maintenance invoice, just, you know, the issues present on the vehicle, oil changes, any major repairs. So just keep that in mind. And then the reimbursement process. So if you are a new capitalized maintenance, preventative maintenance subrecipient, one thing I like to say is that this is not a lump sum payment. When you do receive that capitalized maintenance funding, that preventative maintenance funding, that is funding that is paid out over 4 quarters. And we'll talk about that in the next slide as well. But the way that is paid out is that we have an invoice spreadsheet, a reporting spreadsheet that we actually designed that we will send out to all of our state fiscal year 2025 preventative maintenance, capitalized maintenance subrecipients, and they will fill that out. So invoice templates will be sent for all of the subrecipients that receive operating, capitalized maintenance, and then capital cost of contracting. Subrecipients will input the budget amount from the application in their budget narrative into that invoice template. I want to stop here because this is very important. Again, subrecipients will input the budget amount from application budget narrative into the invoicing template. Your invoicing template, meaning the amounts and what you stated to ODOT for what you're budgeting, should not be different than the actual invoice that you sent to us. Meaning that, you know, if you stated that $5,000 was going to be used for contract maintenance services, I shouldn't see a budget for $10,000 in the invoice. If I do see a budget there, we are going to send it back. Does that mean the budget cannot change? No, but what it does mean is that before you make any budget changes, you do need to communicate that with ODOT. So if you have an amount, let's say ODOT has given you $20,000 for contract maintenance services, and then, you know, in your application you put, well, of this $20,000, we're only going to spend $5,000 in contract maintenance services, and then you put $10,000 on the invoice that you submit to me, there's going to be an issue. There needs to be communication before you make any of those major changes. Then what's also new is the subrecipient will then submit those invoices to, and I have the link here, when you submit that to this email address, you will also CC me as the program coordinator as well. I know a lot of you are probably asking why it has to be sent to this new email address, and that's just because we don't want to have any delay on your payments, or we don't want those to be missed as well. So if for any reason I am out of the office, another staff member will have access to this email inbox that we have, so that way that payment will still be processed in a timely fashion. And then what I'm going to do is a capitalized maintenance invoice walkthrough. Now I will say this is going to be at a high level. So I'm going to possibly be working on doing a more in-depth training as it relates to completing this invoice, but just to put on your radar, this will be at a high level. So there won't be every single line item that I'll go through, but there are some line items and some information that I want to point out really quickly just to keep in your mind. And I will go ahead and pull up that capitalized maintenance invoice. Then going to wait for a thumbs up. Okay, great that my screen is sharing. Alrighty, so this is a capitalized maintenance invoice, or that invoice reporting that I was mentioning to you throughout the presentation. And what you'll notice is that there are several different tabs here. There's an instructions tab, there is a crosswalk tab, which we'll go over that shortly. There is your capitalized maintenance budget tab, and then we have quarters 1, 2, 3, and 4. What I mentioned at the beginning as well is that the capitalized maintenance grant is not a lump sum payment. So again, you'll see that there are different quarters in which you have to put in your expenses. That way ODOT knows what needs to be paid out for each of those quarters. And then we also have a capitalized maintenance expense classes definition, where if for any reason you're completing this and you're not sure if something that you are entering is eligible, you're more than welcome to refer to this tab, where there are different line items that will show you what's actually eligible to be claimed. So just keep that in mind. Then we also have a tab for the revenues class. So when you're putting in those revenues, here's what's eligible for service. Alrighty, and then I am going to go back to the crosswalk tab. My screen's still sharing. Okay, going to go back to the crosswalk tab. Now, what's new this year is the crosswalk tab. And the best way to explain this is you'll notice that there are several different line items on this particular tab. Not every line item is eligible. But when you are completing your crosswalk tab, for example, one of the main line items that a lot of preventative maintenance, capitalized maintenance subrecipients are going to complete is called the contract maintenance services line. So I am going to unhighlight this because that will make it very confusing for you. There we go. Okay, so the contract maintenance services tab. This particular tab here is for all of your maintenance for those particular vehicles. What the crosswalk is saying is, what is the corresponding account code in your finance system for your contract maintenance services? So let's say you've never received a preventative maintenance grant before. Well, when you're getting that maintenance done with local money that's in your agency's account, your finance team is tracking those expenses. They're tracking what's coming in and what's going out. In most cases, there's a code when they're completing that profit and loss statement. And I will say you will want to work with your finance team on this, but there is an account code that's specific for all of the maintenance that you're charging for your vehicles. We will want you to put that information here, so that particular account code. Let's say it's 5500, just hypothetically. And then you'll also want to put the name of that account code as well. So, for example, your finance team may say, we have account code 5500 and it's titled maintenance. And this is, and hopefully I spelled that right, but if I didn't, please no one come for me. But, this is just titled maintenance here, 5500 maintenance, so that ODOT knows that you have an account code that exists and your finance team is keeping track of all of those maintenance costs for your particular agency. I will say another line item that is eligible through contract maintenance services, the second one, is the other materials and supplies. So I'll highlight that one as well. If you're new or you're returning, this is something that you may know already, is that in most cases for preventative maintenance and contract maintenance services, invoice, there are only mainly two line items that you should be charging to the grant, which is contract maintenance services for all of your maintenance costs, and then your other materials and supplies. Now that's if you're getting, windshield wiper fluid and those things, or I know in some cases there are agencies that might purchase something off of Amazon for the vehicle, some type of part that they might need. For your other materials and supplies, this might be 5400, and then you might your finance team might just title it supplies. In that case, this is what we're looking for. We're looking for the corresponding account code that you have on your end that represents your contract maintenance services line, and then the title of that, which it may not be exactly contract maintenance services, but it might be something along the lines of maintenance. And then the same thing for your other materials and supplies. I will then move to the next tab, which is your, and this says 2023, but it'll be changed to 2025. This is your program capitalized maintenance budget. And essentially what we'll have here is your grantee name, your project number, and then also your federal contract amount. If you receive state money, which all preventative maintenance subrecipients did receive state money, we will change this to say state contract amount. And then your annual budget is the budget amount that we give you within your award. So that'll, for example, if you were awarded $20,000 in contract maintenance services or for preventative maintenance, you will put that amount here. These are highlighted. That makes it a little confusing, but they won't be highlighted on your end. And then also to your annual budget, you'll notice down here, you will put as well the amount that you receive from ODOT, which will be referenced in your federal or state contract amount. And then I will slide and do quarter one, which for quarter one, as an example, when you complete your budget tab here, these tan fields will automatically pull over into the tan fields here in your budget narrative, or your budget invoice. So there's not anything you need to type in here. The blue fields is what you're actually going to type in. So for example, let's say in the budget narrative, you received, or in your application, your award, you received $20,000 for contract maintenance services for preventative maintenance. That's not 20, that's 2. As you can see that will automatically pull over. For Q1, we're asking of that contract maintenance services amount for Q1, how much of that 20,000 did you spend in Q1? It might be that you only spent 4,000. So then again, that is what we're asking for. It will show you also to your budget balance as well. And then once you scroll all the way down, you'll start to see that information calculated. And again, I didn't build this out, so that's why it's saying false. But once yours is built out, it will say true. So I know that was a high-level overview of how to, quickly complete the capitalized maintenance invoice, but just keep in mind, that information will continue to come as we are developing training around this, but just a high-level overview. Then I will go back to the actual presentation so that we can move to the next slide. Okay. So for capitalized maintenance, supporting documentation. So let's say you have the capitalized maintenance invoice and the reporting form, and you've put in all of your expenses and you're ready to submit that information. There are some items that we will need and we do require with each reimbursement submission. So we need the Excel sheet, which I pulled up and showed you. We need that completed. We need what's called a signed PDF. All this means is that Excel sheet you need to put in PDF form and it needs to be signed by whoever completed that invoice template. We also need what's called a project cost report, which I have a slide that's quickly dedicated to what that information is and what we're looking for. We also knew this year we need any receipts for any repair cost that's more than $400. So let's say you took the vehicle to get an engine replaced. An engine being replaced is an eligible cost, but we need the receipt for that. So just keep in mind if there are any expenses that are on your reimbursement invoice that are more than $400, we do need receipts for that. But then there might be expenses that are not more than $400 that we may still require a receipt for. And it doesn't mean that those expenses aren't eligible, but we just kind of want a little bit more detail about what that expense is. So, don't feel like you can't put expenses that are more than $400. Just know that it very much is eligible. It's just that we want a little bit more information about that. One thing that's new this year as well is the payroll expense sheets and timesheets for any salaries claimed. So as you can remember, if you have a mechanic that you're claiming their salary and fringe benefits for the work that was done on those 5310 vehicles, we will need those payroll expense and timesheets. And then the project cost report. So as I mentioned, the project cost report is something that we will need each quarter with each submission. Another name for the agency's, or the PCR is another name for the agency's QuickBooks, profit and loss statement. So your finance team will be very familiar with what this information actually is. That PCR must include all the project revenues and expenses. So pretty much what this profit and loss statement is and what ODOT is looking for is that for Q1, if you spent $4,000 in maintenance services, that QuickBooks, that profit and loss statement should show us where that $4,000 was spent, and then how much of that $20,000, which was the $4,000, was spent as well. So just a document that's downloaded exactly from your QuickBooks system, which your finance team will have, that shows that information. And then the PCR must align with the crosswalk that was previously approved within your project budget. And then here is an example that I wanted to put for a project cost report. I know there are some agencies that are new that have received preventative maintenance before or haven't received preventative maintenance before, and there's been some challenges with the project cost report. Here's an example of a really great project cost report or profit and loss statement. As you can see, and I will say not every agency's finance system is built this way, so this is just an example. You don't have to go and have your finance team go and change everything in your system. This is just an example where this agency has that accounting code. So we know 8703 is maintenance and repairs. They also have information for the vehicle type, as well as the dates in which that service was done, where that service was actually done, which is Piper's Service Center, and then the amount that was actually charged. In this case, we did request receipts, of course, for anything that was more than $400, but just keep in mind, this is what we're looking for as it relates to a project cost report, or wanting to see what that account code is, or wanting to see possibly, which vehicles were in the repair shop, the dates, and then the name of the actual service center. Here's also another example as well. You'll notice, and I'm going to slide back really quickly, both of these project cost reports are different, and I wanted to put this here because I wanted agencies to know that your agency doesn't have to have the exact same project cost report as someone else. This one is slightly different and also provides, oops, it looks like my screen stopped sharing on my end. Oh, from current slide, I apologize about that. But this project cost report has that account code. So we know 5908 is the account code on their end. It's titled Vehicle Maintenance Repair. They also have the cost. And then what I also like on this specific project cost report is that they have the description for what was actually done. So just something to keep in mind and something that we're looking for as it relates to the project cost report. Reimbursement, subrecipients will submit those invoices to ODOT quarterly. I mentioned that there are 4 quarters. And then here are the invoice due dates for those quarters as well. I will go ahead and send out an email each time. I usually do it a week before for each invoice that is due. So for quarter 1, it will be due October 30th. I'll send an email at the end of September just to let agencies know that, hey, October is coming around, and or not at the end of September, but usually towards like a week before the end of October to let you know that that report needs to be submitted. If the due date falls on a weekend or holiday, please send it the next business day. Please don't stress on a holiday or a weekend with submitting that. Definitely just get it to us the next business day. I have those marked in my calendar as well. Alrighty, so I will stop here to see if there are any questions as it relates to capitalized maintenance.
Okay, thank you, Kara. We have a question asking if you can explain the rules for tire repairs and new tires.
Okay, yes, so this is a question we get a lot as well. So tire repair is different than new tires. Tire repair is if you're plugging a tire. Let's say that you have an employee that was driving and they ran over a nail. Well, to get that tire plugged or to get it, repaired, meaning it doesn't have to be replaced, you will put that on your capitalized maintenance invoice. If you are purchasing new tires and the purchase of those new tires needs to be on your operating invoice. It should never be on your capitalized maintenance. Also, too, if you're getting your tires replaced, that should also fall within your operating. So replace and purchase would be on operating versus if you're just getting it, a small tiny repair, maybe you're just getting it plugged. Sometimes, we drive over nails and things like that, and it might just, maybe just needs a little small fix, but not a full replace of that tire.
Great, thank you, Kara. Oh, let's see here. Okay, so the participant is asking if the section that you were covering is just for those who are receiving preventative maintenance grants. So in other words, the requirements that are not for those who only submitted and received a grant to purchase a vehicle. I'm not quite, I don't know if that makes sense.
No, okay. It makes sense. It makes sense. So, and that's something I could have mentioned during the beginning of the presentation. So I've already covered in the presentation, and for the individual that asked that, please let me know if I haven't answered it. But in the beginning of the presentation, I've already covered vehicles and vehicle section. So if you are an agency that has received a vehicle only project for state fiscal year 2025, meaning you didn't apply for any other projects, the only project that you have for state fiscal year 2025 is a vehicle, I've already covered that section, so you are more than welcome to drop off. Now, the next sections I will cover, which will be, I've already covered capitalized maintenance, contracted services, and operating. If you have contracted services, operating, or preventative maintenance, then you will need to stay on the line. Or equipment, I apologize, or equipment as well. That's the fourth one. You will need to stay on the line. If you've only received vehicles and you don't have any of the other projects, you can drop off. For any agency that has vehicles, and then you also have operating, capitalized maintenance, and all of those other ones, you will need to stay on, as we will discuss additional projects as well. If you just have vehicles, feel free to go ahead and drop off because we've already addressed that section.
Wonderful, thank you. Let's see here. We have a participant asking if the accounting system needs to be in before receiving preventative maintenance funding.
Yes, so good question. Yes, you will want to work with your finance team on that accounting system and having that accounting system in place. Now, that is not that is something that we assume the agency would have in place when you are completing that budget narrative in your application, because the budget narrative asks you for that accounting system. So if you don't have the accounting system in place, that is something you definitely want to now before those contracts go out. You will want to have that accounting system in place. But it doesn't mean that your award will be returned or revoked. It's just that you're wanting to get that in place, and we will need to see that in place before we actually issue that contract, which I want to make clear as well, that an agency can always receive an award, meaning that ODOT can put that award in a award announcement, but that award is not set in stone until you have an executed contract by not only your agency, but our deputy director has signed off on that. So any award at any time is not set in stone until you have a contract.
Fantastic, thank you, Kira. I do believe that is the end of our questions. Oh, nope, I just got one more. I think it's a follow-up then to the question you were just answering. If you plan on applying for preventative maintenance in September, will you attend a meeting at a later date?
Yes, so I think I understand what they're asking. So whenever we have the application cycle, we always have what's called a mandatory application workshop. That is something very separate from this. The mandatory application workshop actually goes into detail about the actual application, letter of intent, what the application will look like, how you apply for different projects. This particular presentation is about, now that you have the project, what you need to do and what are the next steps. So when you do apply next year, or not next year, but when you apply in September for the next state fiscal year, we will have a mandatory application workshop that you will need to attend to be eligible to apply.
Wonderful, thank you. I do believe that was the last question that we have for now.
All righty, awesome. So we will go ahead and move to the next topic, which is equipment. And I think we only have about one subrecipient that received equipment projects this year. So we'll kind of get through this section pretty quickly. We do have procurement, a couple of procurement slides, which I'll have Tim come in pretty quickly and give just an overview of procurement. So eligibility and local share, computer hardware and software equipment that support 5310 funded vehicles are eligible for this particular project. Of course, that seek to remove transportation for seniors and persons with disabilities. So keep in mind, a few examples of this would be radios for buses, scheduling and dispatching software and equipment. The subrecipient must begin procurement process within 30 days of the executed contract. So if you received equipment funding, let's say you received some funding to purchase radios for your vehicles or scheduling and dispatching software. When that contract is executed, within 30 days, you do need to be reaching out to our compliance team, more specifically Tim Mistako, going through that procurement process and starting that actual process, completing the documentation for the specific documents that relate to how much funding you received. So keep that in mind. All capital items must be procured and purchased by the agency before ODOT will issue the funds. So you need to go through that procurement first. That procurement needs to be approved by ODOT compliance team. And then once it's approved, you need to purchase that item. And then you need to submit a request to ODOT for reimbursement for those items that you purchased. Projects will only be reimbursed if all of the steps of the procurement process were completed successfully and approved, again, by the ODOT compliance staff. Once procurement and purchase have been approved, the agency may send over a final receipt of purchase to be reimbursed by ODOT. And then we'll go ahead and jump into procurement. So I will let Tim go ahead and jump on and speak about some procurement items.
Okay, thanks, Kira. So I just want to cover a few basic things about your procurement process to make sure you understand the general rules. So first you have micro purchases or procurement, which is up to $10,000. And on this form here, you will see that these are our checklists that are available to you. We can send those out to you as needed. But on the micro purchase one, you have a fair and reasonable price documentation form that we ask for. And that is really important that you fill that out. What the FTA is wanting to see and or state is that you have reasonably determined the price you're going to pay for that item is fair. It's fair and reasonable. We don't want to overspend our tax dollars in a non-profitable way. Davis-Bacon is only if you do construction, so most likely not going to be impacting you. They do want you to keep a copy of your vendor invoice and or delivery receipt in a file, along with a copy of the PO you used for that purchase. So however you want to do that is fine by us. When you're making a micro purchase, we are not asking you to send that information to us up front, but it will be reviewed during the technical assistance reviews. So if we come out and say, hey, you were selected for a TAR, and we're going to come out and review your vehicles and your procurement information, all these different things, then we are going to pull these files and want to see that you have this information. If we find that you do not have that information, then you could be in a situation where you may have to end up making that a non-allowable expense and potentially paying that back or reducing a future invoice to offset the cost difference. So we want to avoid that. And so just make sure you're making sure that the purchase is fair and reasonable. And it doesn't have to be this ODOT form that's listed. It can be anything that's equivalent. Some people will use a stamp to stamp the actual invoice and write on there how they determined the fair and reasonable. Or another person told me they use a sticker. They have pre-printed, they peel the stickers, throw it on the invoice, and handwrite it in that way. But if you look at the fair and reasonable price document, it actually kind of lists what factors the FTA and or state would like to see when determining if that's fair and reasonable. For small purchases, it's $10,000 and 1 cent up to $49,999. So anything in between over 10,000, under 50 is going to fall into this. This is much more intrusive in the sense you have a lot of documents you have to fill out. First, you have to obtain written ODOT concurrence from your program coordinator, which would be Kira. She's just saying that, yes, you can go ahead and start this process because I have the PO or whatever on our end ready to fund that. Then you're going to have to do the ICE, the independent cost estimates, and get a copy of the specs and the price quotes, and analyzing that. And you're just going on this checklist. I won't go through it all today, but there's a whole checklist of things here. I will work with you individually as needed to make sure you have these things in order. I cannot approve your payment until this checklist is completed in full, you've signed off on it, and you have all that documentation provided to me so that I can see that you've actually done it as well. We do ask you to use our ODOT forms as much as possible. We will allow equivalent forms, so it doesn't have to be the ODOT form, but there has to be a good excuse why you couldn't use our form, because our forms allow us to be able to review it because it's consistent with what we're looking at every time. And then in large purchases, if you happen to have a $50,000 or more purchase, there's 3 phases to that. And so we have to go through each one of those phases one by one. And so you'll see in that checklist here, the large phase has certain places, things to do, and then a stop. And you're gonna send all that information to me. Once I approve that and say, yep, that looks good, we can go on to phase 2. And then we stop again. And then once I get through that with you, then we can go on to that final and 3rd stage. So that's kind of the layout of those purchases. We can go to the next slide. So this is the new ODOT procurement forms that we've come up with. This is not set in stone the only forms, but these are the basis. We've copied off some other states and kind of started doing what they're doing. Whether you're getting federal dollars or state dollars makes no difference for our procurement processes. You're going to use these forms when they're applicable off of that checklist and make sure you complete those in full and then send them to me for review. I would say that you're going to ask, where are these forms right now? We're trying to decide where they're going to be located so they're easily accessible. But for the time being, until you hear differently, please contact me directly and I can send you those forms right back to you through email. And so here is my procurement contact information. I am the Transit Compliance Manager, and there's my phone number, my email, and our mailing address, so you have my information.
Alrighty, thanks, Tim. And if any agency has any additional questions about procurement, wants to learn a little bit more about procurement, or you possibly will have to do procurement for your state fiscal year 2025 project, please feel free to reach out to Tim. He's more than happy to assist.
Kiera, can I mention one more thing before I shut off?
Yeah, absolutely.
The technical assistance reviews that I just mentioned, we are going to be ramping those up in 2025. So if you're a vehicle only, I know somebody may have dropped off, but if you're a vehicle only entity, most likely you haven't had a technical assistance review. We are going to be ramping those up in 25, and many of those vehicle only ones are going to be get selected, as well as people get operating and or preventive maintenance dollars. So if you're not familiar with the TAR process, we'll be reaching out and let you know more about that as time goes on. But I want to make everyone aware that there's a better chance in the next few years you're going to be selected for a technical assistance review. So you really want to keep your documents, not just your procurement documents, but your reporting documents, your invoicing documents, your important documents such as your ADA policy, your Title VI policy. All those things are really important to make sure you keep those in order and you communicate with our office, because our goal is to prevent you from not being allowed to get a future funding application approved. That's our entire goal. It's not to catch you doing something wrong. It's not to chastise you. It's to assist you in staying compliant so that funding can continue to come to you. That's all. Thanks, Kiera.
Alrighty, thanks, Tim. I appreciate that. And again, please feel free to reach out to Tim if you have to do procurement for state fiscal year 2025. Alrighty, so the slide I have here is the reimbursement process. So again, if you received an equipment project such as radios or scheduling dispatching software, again, you have to go through procurement that has to be approved, and then you are set to purchase that. When you do submit that reimbursement form that you'll use, you'll see it has the grantee information, program name, your ODOT project number, all of this information you'll have to complete. This form will be sent out to all of the agencies that will need to submit reimbursement for equipment. So this is just a picture here, but you'll actually have the form template that you will complete, and then we will do that reimbursement for you. And then I will stop here to see if there are any questions in the queue.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kiera. We have a question from someone who wants to know if they can sign up to be notified when the ODOT vehicle grant applications are open so they don't miss them.
Yes, if they will go ahead and send an email to me, I'll have the, my screen is showing the actual first slide, and I'm not sure why, but I will make sure that everyone gets my email address so that you can send an email to me, and then I can get you added on my list to be notified of future application cycles for 5310.
Wonderful. And I'm watching your screen too. It is doing, okay, there we go.
Yeah.
Are we allowed to apply or receive funds for all grants covered? Does the LOI for equipment also open in September?
Yes, the equipment LOI does open in September, so you can apply for that in September. The first part of your question, I'm not sure I understand. You said is there grant funds for all programs? Might have to provide some clarification on that.
The exact way it was presented is, are we allowed to apply / receive funds for all grants covered? I don't know if that helps.
I'm gonna take a stab. I think I know what you're asking. It might be in regards to, can we apply for multiple projects within the 5310 program? And the answer to that is yes. If the agency applies for operating preventative maintenance, vehicles, equipment, contracted services, you can apply for all of those projects. It's not guaranteed, of course, with the grant funding that you will get all of those projects, but you can apply for all of those projects. So there is no limitation on the amount of projects and the amount of funding that you can apply for. So I think that might be what the individual is asking, or might be the underlying question there.
You're absolutely right. I appreciate your answer.
Okay, I try to read between the lines a little bit on some of these questions. So if I missed anything, please feel free to send me an email, and I can definitely dig a little deeper into your question.
Wonderful. Okay, that's all the questions we have for now, Kiera.
Okay, awesome. So we will go ahead and move to the second topic, which is operating assistance. We'll talk about some eligibility and local share. There are some agencies, I believe we have some returning agencies actually that received operating assistance this year. And so some of this information will be repetitive, but there is a lot of new information that I'm going to share this year that I think is going to be really, really helpful for our operating subrecipients or any agency that possibly wants to apply for state fiscal year 2026. ODOT will reimburse 50% of the cost of your operations, and then the local, of course, provides that 50% local match. Operating expenses, something to keep in mind, are those costs necessary to maintain, manage, and operate that transportation system? So when you're thinking about eligibility as it relates to operating, your day-to-day operating expenses of your business, your driver's salaries and wages, these should be the only salaries and wages that should be claimed. If there are any other salaries and wages that are claimed, before you put those in the invoice, they need to, one, be approved through external audits, and then second, there needs to be a conversation with ODOT about those particular salaries and wages that are being claimed. But the driver salaries and wages, and then what's new and something that I wanted to mention is the other salaries and wages as well. So all of those are here. Just make sure you're communicating that with ODOT and external audits before you put that on your operating invoice. Not operators' labor costs for time spent conducting vehicle maintenance activities. I know there might be some employees that you have that do conduct those vehicle maintenance activities. Administrative staff such as managers, supervisors, and administrative assistants such as your vehicle transportation manager, and then other personnel such as inspectors, vehicle maintenance, training instructors, students, apprentice, and clerks. So just keep that in mind as well. And then general utilities. This will include heat, air conditioning, etc. for your particular building. And then custodial services and security services. If you have this is also eligible as well. Materials and supplies. This is something that's important to know. Your security, other materials and supplies. So when you're thinking about operating is a little bit different than capitalized maintenance in that there are multiple different materials and supplies you can claim. So that's why I do have them bolded here. There's a thing such as security, other materials and supplies. So this will include the fees and expenses for those materials and supplies such as the uniforms, badges, and forms. Transportation administration, other materials and supplies. So this includes, materials used in administering transportation activities such as tool pouches, forms, and then also route directions as well. And then your vehicle parts, such as, your equipment, hoses, gas, diagnostic equipment, engines, things of that nature. Here's where we get into the purchase of tires and tubes. I know this was a question that was asked in the capitalized maintenance section, which related to, the purchase of tires versus repairing those tires. And again, the purchase of new tires and getting those tires replaced actually falls under operating. So make sure you're putting that on your operating invoice. Fuel, and this is fuel for your 5310 funded vehicles or those vehicles that you're using for 5310 related services. If you have any additional questions about that, please feel free to reach out to me. Vehicle licensing and registration fees, car washes. I know this was something that was big last year in regards to where car washes go, but car washes are on your operating invoice, and then professional and technical services. And this is for any outside firms that you hire, such as, maybe if there's an attorney that you have or any other outside firm that helps you with your software and dispatching or anything like that, where you're hiring an outside firm to assist you in that manner, professional and technical services. And then just like the capitalized maintenance grant, there is a uniform system of accounts that does exist. Please refer to sections 4 and 5 for the operating expense classes, where it'll go over the object classes and then the functions as well, to really go a little bit more in detail about some things that are eligible. But I will say, as you are completing your operating invoice, you'll want to make sure that if there are any hesitations or any questions that you have, please make sure that's in writing about, hey, this is something that we're wanting to put on our invoice, our operating invoice, is it eligible? And make sure you have written approval from ODOT before you place that on the invoice. Operating assistance is very similar to, or the supporting documentation is very similar to capitalized maintenance. The following items are required with each reimbursement request. We will have an Excel invoice that you will submit, that signed PDF, very similar to capitalized maintenance, where you're taking that Excel invoice, putting it in PDF form, and then you're signing off on that as someone who has completed that invoice and all of the information is accurate. that project cost report, any materials and supplies purchase that is more than $400. So we will ask for receipts for that. For all of your driver salaries and wages, this is something new that is this year, that if you are claiming any driver salaries and wages, we will need payroll expense and timesheets for all of the salaries that are charged to the grant, whether it be your driver salaries and wages or any of the other administrative staff that was approved through the 2 CFR 200. If you are claiming any contract maintenance services and the line items for operating as well, we will also need receipts for that. The reimbursement process is the same. It'll be done throughout the invoice. ODOT will send those invoice templates for the subrecipients for state fiscal year 2025. You will input those budget amounts from the application, and then you will also want to send those operating invoices over to this email, and then make sure you're CCing me. Again, the reason why we have this here is just in case I am out of the office at any time. I don't want there to be a delay in your payment. Reimbursement continued. We do have a reimbursement process that's very similar to capitalized maintenance. And I'm saying this because I don't want to repeat any of that information, but we do have the dates here. I'll make sure I send out at least a week before the due date, send out an email as a reminder, hey, you know, your invoice first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter are due at this time. Falls on a weekend or holiday, just send it next business day. And then I will do a quick operating invoice walkthrough for you. Again, this will be at a high level. Some of the items that I will talk about are similar to capitalized maintenance and where that information will drag over. So we'll kind of go through this part really quickly. Awesome. So got the thumbs up that my screen is sharing. We do have an instructions tab. We also have the program operating budget tab. You'll notice, and this is one way to know that you have the right invoice, is when you're looking at the tab, of course the date will change, but we have each tab set for the actual project. So if you're seeing CM or CS and you are an operating subrecipient, you know you do not have the right invoice. So definitely just, you know, keep aware of that. You'll put in your grantee name, your project number, and federal contract amount, which will be in your contract. The crosswalk is also the same as well for capitalized maintenance for those different line items that you can charge, such as fuel. Again, we talked about utilities and supplies, your other driver salaries and wages. Your finance team should have that information in a corresponding agency chart of accounts, and then what the name of those particular accounts are. Quarter one, same thing. All of that information will drag over in the TAN fields. And then once your TAN fields are all completed, that information is dragged over, then you will insert in the blue fields only, where you're putting in all of those expenses. And then once you scroll to the very bottom, once I get there, you'll start to see where it's highlighted here, what your payment is. If for any reason you think that the invoice might not be calculating correctly, or you're having some issues where this is not saying true and it's saying false, or you're getting an error message, there might be an issue within, you know, a section of your invoice where something might have been entered incorrectly. So please reach out to me, and I can definitely take a look at it a little bit deeper, kind of open the sales and understand what's going on. One thing that I do want to mention that I did not mention in capitalized maintenance, a lot of times agencies do this 100% correctly and it still says false. And I know this is very, very small, but the invoice does not like cents. So round to whole numbers. Please don't put $100.01, just round it up. So just definitely make sure that you are doing that, because if you have cents in here, it will make this read false. So that essentially is the operating invoice template. It also has the same tabs as capitalized maintenance, where there are expense classes with definitions. So if you want a little bit more detail about what it means for operators, drivers, time, and what actually can be claimed in these line items, please refer to this tab, and that'll give you information about that. And then the revenue classes with definition. If you're trying to understand what local match is eligible and what can be claimed, there is actually information on this tab for you as well. So I will head back to the presentation, and then I will see if there are any questions for operating.
So far, we don't have any. Give
Okay.
everybody a moment. Yeah, we don't have anything.
Okay, awesome. So before I move on to contracted transportation services, I do want to let you all know we are at the home stretch. So just bear with me for the next couple of slides. We'll go through these pretty quickly, and then you'll be able to hop off. But for contracted transportation services only, this is a project that is new this year. Again, we are developing some guidance around this project. So throughout the year, you will start to see, updated guidance and updated instructions on this particular project. This is a project that is eligible to be applied for in September. So if you're still in the line, you just want to know a little bit more about it, that's fine too. But this is a project that ODOT reimburses 80% of the capital cost, and the local provides that 20% local match. Excuse me, this is costs associated with contracting with local providers to provide transportation for seniors and persons with disabilities. So these particular agencies that receive contracted services, they don't have vehicles and they don't have drivers. They're actually contracting with local providers that do have drivers and do have vehicles to provide that transportation services. One important thing about contracted services and what ODOT staff will look at when we dig into these contracted transportation services projects is the demonstration of services that does not duplicate service that's already provided in the area. So we're really going to look at the service that you're stating you're providing, looking at that ridership data to understand how you're not duplicating services that are already provided by the public transit system. One thing to also note is that agencies that do receive this particular project will need to go through procurement and submit those procurement documents with ODOT compliance. So if you remember a couple of slides before, Tim talked about procurement. Feel free to reach out to Tim about the documentation that you will need for contracted services. And then I also wanted to talk about some allowable and unallowable expenses as it relates to contracted transportation services. So contracted transportation services are those expenses and costs associated with contracting with local providers to provide transportation to seniors and persons with disabilities. So some allowable costs are other salaries and wages. So, your administrative staff, such as managers, supervisors, and your administrative assistants that are responsible for overseeing this contracted services project. Their costs are eligible. Funded staff, also too, this is new, funded staff may not oversee or operate any additional projects for which the agency is receiving other ODOT grant monies. Now, I want to take a little bit of time here because I want to be clear on what ODOT means here. So if you are an agency that has other, different projects, mobility management 5311 OTP2, and you have 5310 contracted services, it does not mean that you can have 5310 contracted services and all of these other projects. You're more than welcome to get funding from different programs. It's just that the individuals that are overseeing those other projects within those programs should not be overseeing the contracted maintenance services projects. And that has a lot to do with just, how the money flows, ensuring that there is a clear and concise, flow of money and making sure that money is not mixed within the different programs, using them for local match. For example, and I know that I'm going to probably get a lot of questions after this presentation, we do have some contracted services subrecipients that are mobility managers that oversee these projects. They have been grafted in. That is something that we're having conversations about and we are moving away from in state fiscal year 2026. So those mobility managers that possibly might be on this call, I know that's a lot of information and I know that's new. Please don't be frantic. That is a conversation that we are going to have with you and work with the agency on, options to moving that particular project to, possibly that agency hiring someone else for that project or either upgrading that mobility manager to, oversee that particular project and no longer part of the mobility management function. So just keep that in mind. Those agencies that might be impacted from that statement, I am going to reach out to you and we'll have a further conversation about that. And then purchase transportation services is also an allowable cost as well. So any cost where you are, being reimbursed or you're reimbursing the provider for that transportation, that is eligible as well. And that should be in your contracted purchase transportation line item. So payments to providers. unallowable cost or fuel and lubricants. So the provider should not be submitting a request to you for that fuel for those particular vehicles, and then you submitting a request to ODOT for reimbursement on that. Contract maintenance services. So if there's any maintenance costs that are associated with the vehicles for which the providers are operating, those costs are not eligible through the contracted transportation services, tires and tubes, and then also travel and meetings as well for those providers that are providing that service. The reimbursement process is also very similar to operating and capitalized maintenance. Invoice will be done in the Excel sheet for a state fiscal year 2025, and then this is where you will send that information to. Reimbursement is also the same as well. I'll send out an email a week before so that agencies know when to submit. Also, two items that are required: Excel invoice, that signed PDF, that project cost report, payroll expenses and timesheets for any salaries charged, because salaries are eligible. And then there are occasions where provider invoices will, of course, need to be sent to ODOT. We will request those. So just keep that in mind as well. Make sure you're just keeping track of those. Something that's new in 2024 is the ridership data. So if you are a operating or contracted transportation services provider, or you receive 5310 funding for these projects from us, so not provider essentially, but you are a subrecipient of these particular projects, we will request ridership data. And this will be an email that comes directly from our compliance team. So Sarah Walton will request this information. We're asking for you to be reporting on ridership, revenue miles, and total revenue vehicles for the entire operation of your county, those counties that you're serving. We're asking for this information because this will assist ODOT in capturing the totality of your transit service by county across the state, because that information will be added into the status of transit report. So additional information about that will come out, and that will come from Sarah Walton, but I do have her contact information here should you have any questions. Some of you might have already received that email before, just that welcome email, you know, that you're part of the program and that you have this project, and there will be some reporting coming out for state fiscal year 2025. But if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Sarah. Then I'll stop here to see if there are any contracted transportation services questions.
Okay, we don't have any in queue, so let's just see for a moment if any come in. Okay.
Were there any
Yes.
questions?
No, there are no questions coming in. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh.
Okay, sounds good. I noted as well that this says calendar year 2023 and for a different different program, but I will make sure that gets updated before it's sent out. So apologize about that, just in case anyone noted that. Alrighty, so we are at the home stretch. I promise you guys this is the last like 2 to 3 slides that we'll have here. So thank you everyone for hanging on with me, and this pretty much will conclude the presentation with 2025 contracts. So now that you know about your specific project and some project information, you will have a contract that goes out. So all contracts will be sent for a signature electronically. We do send those contracts through our OneSpan system. If you are a returning agency, you are already familiar with how that works. If you are new to the program, we do have a OneSpan system that we send all of our contracts out to. Now, the contracts will be sent to the authorized official that we have an authorizing resolution for. Now, what I like to do as well is, although I send this out to the authorized official and give them access only to sign, I do like to CC, we have the option of that, CC the program contact that was provided to us in the application on that, that form, on that request. That way you have access to view the actual contract. You won't be able to sign it, but you'll have access to view it. I know that some of the project managers of these different projects are in close contact with their authorized official, you know, assisting them with getting things signed and moving projects along on your end. So I do like you to be aware of that information as well. If the authorized official has signed the application, or if it has changed at any time, an updated authorizing resolution must be on file. So if, I know that from the application time when we awarded the projects to now, there possibly might be a change in the authorizing official. If that is the case, we will need a new authorizing resolution on file signed before I can issue that contract. So if for any reason this is your agency, please reach out to me and I can get you that document. The document is pretty straightforward and just requires like 1 to 2 signatures. So just keep that in mind. Something new this year is the attorney's signature is not required, but we do require that certain assurances, which I will be sending that out before the contracts. And then some important contract items. If you are a returning subrecipient, again, you've seen all of this information, but for our new subrecipients this year, just some things that are very important to know on the particular contract. So the project FAN codes or project ID numbers and the amounts, the period of performance, the CFDA information for audits, the authorized official, and then any other important items. And then your certification and insurances. Agencies are required to sign and have their attorney sign the ODOT certain assurances. So I will make sure those get out to the authorized official, and those will be sent via email. Once complete, the agency must email them back to me, and we will go ahead and file them in our system. And then the agency does have 30 days to sign that certification form. And then that pretty much concludes our presentation. So I will turn it back over to the host to see if we have any last minute questions.
Okay,
I
thank
think
you,
I have something
Kara.
in the chat, message from, I think first time ever, I think I have something in the chat from one of our
I sent
subrecipients.
that
Oh,
to
you
you.
sent this. Okay,
I
okay.
sent that to you just for an FYI for you, since someone sent that over.
Oh, perfect. So I can go ahead and read this just to make sure, just in case there's a question here. It says
They
message
were
from a
just saying thank you.
Oh,
Yeah,
perfect.
they
Okay,
were just saying
regarding
thank
the
you.
program
Yeah.
contact. Okay, yes. So we will make sure, I will definitely make sure that if you are a program contact, you are included on that email that goes out for the contract as well. I know most of you do work with your authorizing official really to push those projects along. So I want to make sure you're included as well. I know that can be very helpful.
Fantastic. Okay, we have a question. Can a staff member's salary be included on any of these grant options for their time writing the grant application and project management if awarded?
No, not for the grant application now, or if you're actually completing the grant application, but if you're either a transportation manager or you're operating those vehicles or you're overseeing those vehicles, or if for any reason you are overseeing that particular project and for administration of that particular project, then yes. But to complete the grant application, no.
Okay, thank you. Is an attorney's signature needed on the assurance and agreement?
Yes, so the search and assurances agreement, we do require an attorney signature for that, yes. And I can go back to that slide as well. Yes, so agencies are required to sign and have an attorney sign the ODOT's search and assurances.
Wonderful, thank you. And are we needing to do any quarterly state GRF program reporting yet?
So there was a time when we had a state fiscal year reporting form for all of the projects that did receive GRF funding, either for OTP2 or in some cases for the 5310 program. So that is something that I can definitely have a discussion about if we're wanting to continue that particular program reporting form. Now, there are just a couple of subrecipients that receive state GRF, which mostly is our preventative maintenance agencies. And so there might be some information that we do request from you as it relates to the drawdowns of those projects.
Okay, thank you. We have someone who says they may have missed this, but is there a timeline as to when the contracts will be emailed and how soon can they expect to see them?
Yeah, so there isn't a, well, when you say timeline, you're probably looking for specific dates. So the projects will actually begin July 1, meaning that's when the agency is eligible to start sending those expenses or gathering those expenses to ODOT. So since the projects do begin July 1, hopefully we'll have the contracts out before July 1, but still kind of working through adding a lot of that information and project information to those contracts. So I don't have a set date yet, but we're possibly looking at the end of June, middle of July timeframe.
Wonderful, thank you. And is the attorney signature only for operations program and 5310?
So the attorney signature is not needed on the actual contract, but it is needed on the certain assurances document. And regardless of the project that you receive, the attorney must be signing those certain assurances. So if you are a program recipient of 5310, you will receive a certain assurances document, which needs to be signed by the attorney.
Wonderful. And looks like we might have our last question, asking if there's any update on when Omega and ODOT will resume regular RCC steering and Region 9 meetings again.
So that's more of a specific question regarding the region. So that agency can, or that individual can reach out to me. We can discuss a little further.
Sounds great. Well, then that is the last of our questions as far as I can tell. Yep, okay, we didn't have any more come in. So, as I said, this webinar will be, has been recorded and it will be sent out with the link as well as the PDF for all registered attendees. So I thank you very much for attending this webinar. And I would also like to thank Kira and Tim again. And I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their day.
Thank you, everyone.
Jennifer, what do I do? They're calling us.